Hello, everyone, and welcome to Blogging Theology. Today, I'm delighted to talk again to Professor Dr. Mustafa Abu Sway. You're most welcome, sir.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Welcome, salam. Good to see you, sir. For those who don't remember, Dr. Mustafa Abu Sway is the first holder of the integral chair for the study of Imam Al-Ghazali's work at the Holy Al-Aqsa Mosque and at Al-Quds University. He was Dean, College of Dawah and Usul al-Din, and College of the Quran and Islamic Studies, Al-Quds University, 2014 to 2020. He is also a member of the Islamic Waqf Council in Jerusalem and member of the Hashemite Fund for the Restoration of Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. He has also been a professor of philosophy and Islamic studies at Al-Quds University in Jerusalem, Palestine, since 1996. Today, Dr. Mustafa Abu Sway will introduce us to Imam Al-Ghazali's famous autobiography, known in English as The Deliverance from Error, an extraordinary spiritual and epistemological treatise. So, over to you, sir.
Thank you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalam ala Rasulullah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala, wa ala jami' al-anbiya wa rusul. We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bless, and He indeed blessed all the messengers, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his brothers amongst the prophets and messengers. And we pray, of course, for all Muslims, and we pray for all humanity at large. Because really what's at stake here is not only knowledge but guidance, and guidance that delivers from error, and we are bound to err in more than one respect. If we talk about sins, there is no concept of original sin in Islam. Everyone is responsible for his or her sin. That is bound to happen. Not that it is predestined. It's because we are so weak. This is the nature of humanity. And the hadith of the Prophet, peace be upon him, he said that all the children of Adam are sinners, and the best of sinners are the repenters. But we speak about something else here in this book. We speak about errors in the sense of really making judgmental mistakes. Sometimes I ask the question to my students: who never got who never got basically a failing point, at least in math in school? Like, sometimes, did you ever make a mathematical mistake? And it seems that people always nod or say, yes, we know, we do make mistakes. You can make a mistake in logic, you can make a mistake in deciphering. It could be chemistry, it could be the universe, just name it. Imam Al-Ghazali, his story, and I'm not going to highlight everything in his life, but enough to understand the era of Imam Al-Ghazali, major events, the cultural, scene, in the sense of, what kind of ideas existed at the major things. Imam Al-Ghazali was born in Tus, Khurasan in 1058. I'm not going to use Islamic calendar because there are also non-Muslims who are not, probably fully aware of the Islamic calendar. So 1058, common era. And it was Tus, Khurasan, a poor child from a poor family. His father was a Sufi lover, Sufi himself. And soon, when he was about to realize that he was passing away, he was going to die, he entrusted him and his brother Ahmad, who's also a Muslim scholar, but more in the realm of the affairs of the heart, Sufism, if you will. He entrusted him to a Sufi friend. Soon, the money that he left behind, the father, was spent on the two kids, sent him to school. And Imam Ghazali, like all classical students, scholars at the time, he learned, the philosophy of Islamic law, Usul al-Fiqh. It's a rather sophisticated topic, and many stories, beautiful stories. For example, on the way back from his first journey, brigands, took everything with the caravan, including Imam Ghazali's books. So Imam Ghazali followed them, asked them to give him back his his books, the knowledge that he traveled to attain, and that brigand there, was smart enough to tell him, how could you claim that you traveled to attain knowledge and I could basically take away knowledge from you? The bottom line, Imam Ghazali would memorize these books. The thief, the highway robber, gave him the books, back to Tus, memorized the books. Ultimately, Imam Ghazali ends up with Imam Haramain al-Juwayni at the Nizami of Nishapur. These are colleges that were established by Nizam al-Mulk, whom we, as a Muslim Ummah, we did not really appreciate enough the role of Nizam al-Mulk. He established these colleges to safeguard, Sunni Islam at large, not a particular, Sunni sect, though, of course, it was Ash'arite, and the school of jurisprudence, the prominent one was Shafi'i. These are non-sectarian schools of jurisprudence. And Sufism, so always like Ash'arite, a Shafi'i and Sufism, they go hand in hand. So, for example, Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Indonesia, they are predominantly Ash'arite, they are predominantly Shafi'i, and they are predominantly Sufi. Historical development nonetheless. So Imam Ghazali, at one point, after the death of Imam Haramain al-Juwayni, he lands a job because he shined. Let me put it this way: Imam al-Ghazali shined. Even his own professor allowed him to teach, in his own presence, like a teaching fellow today at universities. And Nizam al-Mulk, he was the vizier, like he's the prime minister, but there is no cabinet. He was doing everything at the time. So Nizam al-Mulk appointed him as the professor at the Nizamiya of Baghdad now.
I'd like to ask, Doctor, how old was he when he was appointed to this very prestigious post? Then, do you think?
In Baghdad, so we talk about from 1058 to 1091. So that's 33 years. Is that what it is between?
Sounds about right.
Yeah. So that's, and he was now at the prime of his the peak. He already wrote many books in Baghdad. He wrote, of course, Maqasid Falasfi, an introduction to philosophy, the aims of the philosophers, a very objective account of what the philosophers basically, believed, thought, preached, whatever. And later on, he would write Tahafut al-Falasifa, translated as the deconstruction of the philosophers. I think the Tahafut is even, it's just like, you talk about the philosophers collapsing really under his counter arguments. And I think we could, it's very important that at one point when we deal with the philosophers in the book here, to at least to raise the issue that has been raised already in some of your programs about Neil deGrasse and his accusations of Imam al-Ghazali. So here basically it's the book that we will be dealing with. And so fame, money, power, prestigious position, name it, he had it. He had
it all.
He got it all. But that did not really satisfy Imam al-Ghazali. And this is really the most important thing about this book is once we talk about Imam al-Ghazali abandoning his position, distributing his wealth, giving up, living incognito. I know that many, authors, scholars, they have their own version of what happened. But if we stick to what Imam Ghazali said in his book here, I think this is the safest thing. It's not about politics. It's not about his own personal safety. Because if you are worried about your own personal safety, you would not distribute your money. You just take the money with you and just split. So we will deal with this. I think the most important thing ultimately in this book, if you reach these two things, and if we could succeed today in this, in this particular presentation, if we could succeed in distinguishing between two major things that happened in Baghdad, and of course everything would fall into place, hopefully. One is basically systematic doubt, the other his own intentions, his own sincerity, his own why he treaded, because you could basically have systematic doubt, and this will not lead to a spiritual change, a spiritual renewal, a spiritual. So we have these two major things in his life. Now, back to 1058, the year in which he was born. That's the year when al-Baghdadi, of course, from Baghdad, wrote his book on the sects that existed in Baghdad at the time. And he enlisted more than 70, sects, putting some of them under, different, classifications, so that he would keep the number in check. But it shows that Baghdad was full with all kinds of ways of life, ways of thinking, philosophers, intellectuals, sects that are still within the Islamic realm, sects that ended up out there and outside the realm of Islam. And Imam Ghazali, he says basically from the very beginning in this particular book, in the Al-Munqidh min Dalal, the deliverance from error, also translated as freedom and fulfillment, many translations, that from his own childhood, seeking truth, seeking indubitable knowledge, was really put in himself, in his breast, if you will, from the age of childhood, really. And he mentions the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam: كل مولود يولد على الفطرة فأبواه يهودانه أو نصرانه أو مجسانه. Every child is born into a state of natural disposition, fitra. Yeah. And it is his parents that lead him to become, Jews, Christians, or Magians. Now, probably at this stage, a Muslim reading this hadith might have a congregatory basically notion that, we are on the other side of the argument. It's only Jewish kids who are misled, or Christian kids who are misled, or whoever is the Taoists, Hindus, Buddhists, atheists.
Yeah.
In fact, it's really all those in such a position could impart wrong knowledge to children, including Muslim parents. So it's not a cause for celebration, because the fact is, just in as much as a child is born into a specific sect today, is prone to influence from parents, and many things could be dumped on the child. In fact, in school, you should never be so sure. Yes, math, I agree with you, but once it comes to astrophysics, physics, listening to some of the scientists, you can read this through Thomas Kuhn's The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, that during a certain period you are so sure about the scientific worldview, then years later, a decade later, a little bit even more, you see that there's a major paradigm shift. Yes, thank you. So if there's a paradigm shift in science, and we know very well what happens in the back rooms of it's not the conference, it's not in front of people, what scientists speak, what they say to each other, I think is very, very important. Do we have such a thing? Yes, but Imam Ghazali, he already had this as a child. Now, since he was seeking, he did not want to conform, which is really pretty much what people do. A Christian child conforms to whatever church he or she is born into. Usually, maybe later on they change, but they conform at one point. They might have their own doubts, but they conform, at least outwardly they do. And Imam Ghazali, he does, he did speak about daring to abandon, the low state of conformism and to go beyond this. And here he starts basically saying that he assumes always someone, it could be a reality that someone asked him for, to write this book, if you will. But I think it's very important to mention that the book is systematic. Okay, systematic. Literally, Imam Al-Ghazali had developed, his ideas. He was paving the way, and of course, one can see it, right from the very beginning. He went through the major schools of thought, epistemological thought, the possibilities of truth, if you will, but he was paving the way towards Sufism. That's one thing. Number two, it's devoid of all the nonsense that we have today in many autobiographic works. Okay, this is not Prince Harry's Spare. It could be because of a vendetta within the family between the two brothers, just going back all the way to the first two brothers, the Cain and Abel, though it was, of course, but it could be Nelson Mandela's, the long walk to freedom. Here, the aim is totally different. Malcolm X, you talk about black themes, could be summarized in the today, Black Life, matters, which is true. And you have a host of people who wrote, autobiographic works that really detail scandalous lives, nothing more. It's not about food, it's not about dress, it's not about, this is about knowledge, how knowledge is possible, what knowledge is possible to attain, how, under what conditions, what you need to live, and really it's a psychological state, because he says, he dared, وَمَسْتَجْرَأْتُ, that's basically daring to go beyond that initial stage of child conformity. But even as a child, here we have Imam Al-Ghazali showing up as a child who was really looking at things through a different lens. He wanted indubitable knowledge that you cannot doubt. And since you begin with the premise that I cannot conform to things that are given to me, I need to verify on my own, so he needs to start. And
can I just say, somewhat randomly perhaps, what you've just said about Al-Ghazali seeking indubitable certain knowledge just strikes me, sitting here in France, reminds me of René Descartes, of course, the early modern European philosopher, whose systematic methodological doubt, he wasn't a skeptic, but at all, he sought certain knowledge, found what we now call in philosophy foundationalism, the idea that there is a basic principle which cannot be questioned, upon which all other knowledge can be built. And I know Descartes and Al-Ghazali are not the same, but it just rings similar to my ears anyway.
Now to a big surprise. Thank you very much for bringing up, René Descartes, and bringing him to the picture. In his book, Meditations, that's where basically he has the systematic, his own systematic, and we talk about, I doubt. I think, therefore I am, really.
One thing he couldn't doubt. So he, cogito ergo sum.
Cogito ergo sum. So the idea, if you talk about doubting the senses, okay, that's exactly identical. There was a Tunisian scholar who said, in this Tunisian scholar, that he saw a copy of Descartes' Meditations with his own handwriting, a copy of Descartes, a copy of Al-Munqidh min ad-Dalal, Deliverance to Error. It could be Latin, it could be French, because during that period both were, in use amongst scholars. That's a beginning of the modern philosophy, if you will. He said that he saw Descartes' handwriting in the margins of the Deliverance to Error, Imam Al-Ghazali's Deliverance to Error.
Really? So you're saying that Descartes himself actually was familiar with Al-Ghazali's deliverance from error. That would explain. So, in a sense, this greatest of French philosophers borrowed at least some of the ideas then from an Islamic philosopher.
It does not surprise me. In fact, if we move just a little bit beyond Descartes, Jean-Jacques Rousseau admitted in a letter to the Academy of Dijon around 1776, so a little bit later, after Descartes, he said that Europe used to exist in a state worse than ignorance in the dark. We talk about the Dark Ages, and help came. It's bittersweet what he said. He said help came from the least expected quarters. It came from the stupid Muslim. Well, at least it came from the Muslim. That's an early notion of Islamophobia, but it doesn't really bother me that much. Suffice to say that they realized the Enlightenment was an enlightenment that came through Andalusia, through Islamic writings, and we were not simply carrying the Greek philosophy as is. No, it's basically a package, and this is really the relationship between cultures, between civilizations. You just take from that which existed, you digest it, and you present it.
It's an idea that we find in Europe, in where I am now, very hard to accept, that the idea of the indebtedness of the Western intellectual tradition to earlier Islamic precursors. You mentioned Islamic Spain, of course. You mentioned Al-Ghazali, and then many, many others, not just in philosophy, but in science as well, in optics and surgery and medicine. The list of mathematics, the list is endless. But we're very bad, particularly here in France, for some reason. We don't like to admit it. There's any indebtedness to the Muslim world.
This is really a fact, but we can challenge this by reintroducing. If we say, for example, Ibn Rushd, Averroes, as he was known, was he European? Yes. Are you going to reject his Europeanness because he was from Andalusia? You shouldn't. I stayed at a hotel in Cordoba, in Spain, and really they had quotations from Ibn Rushd on the walls, and from Ibn Rushd, but also from Maimonides, and so it was. It was real celebration of convivencia, but let's remember that convivencia in itself as a paradigm, as coexistence between the various
coexistence.
It's really coexistence. So Imam Al-Ghazali, and just a very small footnote, I tried to get a copy of that, in just a photocopy of Descartes' personal copy, and I realized over the years that his own personal library was distributed over different places in France, and it could be at the National Public Library, and that's the latest. But I hope that I will one day, get my hand on that. A Tunisian scholar passed away, and there was no way to find out where he found it. At any rate, so Imam Al-Ghazali now, he says that he will mention major schools that existed at the time in terms of the possible source of indubitable knowledge. He mentioned the Ilm al-Kalam, Islamic theology, and Kalam also made it to English because it really speaks about Islamic rather than Greek metaphysics or what have you. We don't talk about Christian theology, we don't talk about Jewish theology. And in fact, if you talk about Jewish theologians who lived in who are Arab, really, religion is one thing. They were influenced by Kalam, but Kalam in itself, Imam Al-Ghazali, and I think
you mentioned Maimonides. Sorry, in Islamic Spain, the very famous Jewish philosopher and scholar, and so on, and he was obviously very much influenced by Kalam as well. So
he was and also he's practically like Ibn Rushd. Both of them were physicians. Both of them were jurists. Both of them were.
They were everything. Polymaths. These guys were competent in everything. It was amazing.
Yes. Yeah. But about Kalam, Imam Al-Ghazali says that wafin bimaqsudihi غير wafin bimaqsudi. It fulfills its own aim. It does not fulfill my own aim. Like Kalam is not, because you say what is Kalam? You basically base your premise on, you take your premise from the argument of your opponent. So it does not produce new knowledge, and also it's not something that you need to you cannot verify through this particular methodology. It is needed to defend the faith. And personally, I think that today probably what we need most is kalam. That's a different story, because it's not about whether Muslims perform ablution this way or that. It's not about a particular point in the way we deal with the environment, or it's about how the Islamic worldview is framed in general in the public sphere, and this is the area of kalam. This is in the deliverance from error in Ihya Ulumuddin, the revival of Islamic sciences. Imam Ghazali says the need for kalam is exactly similar to the need for guards on the path of the pilgrims. If you have highway robbers, then you need guards. No highway robbers, you don't need guards. Same thing for kalam. It depends on the context. You might need it and you might not need. So it's not an essential thing, really. And the second one is really we talk about what he described as Ahlul Ta'lim. But Ahlul Ta'lim here is a reference to the Batinites, though it could cover any non-Sunnite sect that restricts its knowledge to one person as the Imam. Hence, we talk about Imamites, like 12th Imamites with 7th Imamites. And the problem with this, Imam Ghazali says that you claim to be learning from an absent Imam, because they believe at one point that the last Imam lives in occultation. It's a long story.
Literally hidden away somewhere.
He's hidden, so how could you learn from someone who is not present? And do we have people who restrict their knowledge? In fact, I know I have participated in a conference maybe 2-3 years ago, and we had somebody from the United States participating. Herself belongs to some Ismaili offshoot, and she believes that the Imam, their Imam, is the only one who is entitled to interpret the Quran. I was really surprised, because really we never had such a thing in the Sunnite worldview. It is pretty much egalitarian. Everyone has access. All that you need to do is learn Arabic, but not superficial. Learn Arabic and you have access to the text. There is no monopoly. We don't have. Maybe to explain this further, I was once someone, a non-Muslim, who explained he compared the world of Catholicism to Shiism, because you have a hierarchy. So you have someone who's really at the head, the Pope being and he compared the Sunnites to the Protestants, because really it's decentralized. And this is why we don't have an authority. You just write what you need to write, and you just say what you need to say, and then the community of scholars either they accept, they reject, they augment, so this is the way, this is the spirit. But there is definitely you don't basically restrict knowledge to one person only, because really this is not even the case with Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him. Had he been with us, that's a different story. But since basically I love what it's not about putting people in certain categories, but someone from Jerusalem, a philosopher, an intellectual, maybe religion per se, the way we are talking about it, maybe is not his thing, but he has a beautiful statement. He said, when humanity was ready for the final message, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed, the Quran. So, and the Quran itself described itself, and we have facilitated the Quran for remembrance, for understanding, for, you engage the text of the Quran, but all that you need to do is roll up your sleeves, your epistemological sleeves, and
easier said than done, of course, but anyway.
Yes. So then he number 3 will be philosophy, and he goes later on into details about what's in philosophy that is good, what's in philosophy that contradicts, that is not really, cannot be reconciled, which is really Greek metaphysics. And then he does speak why he left teaching in Baghdad, and he would go back to teaching in Nishapur. And I would highlight this issue. Many scholars, many preachers, many I've seen it also in the texts of non-Muslim scholars, academics, who say that Imam Al-Ghazali, for example, did teach here and there at smaller, in between Baghdad. No, he never did. In fact, when he returned to teaching in Nishapur later on, it was Fakhr al-Mulk, son of Nizam al-Mulk, who basically put enough pressure on him. But he had a beautiful relationship with his father, with Nizam al-Mulk. He went back to teaching, and when Fakhr al-Mulk was assassinated like his father at the hands of the Batinites, the esoterics, it's in fact the word assassin came into English through their movement Hashashin. So it's not. That's basically what we have learned. Then Imam Al-Ghazali says that from the time he was before 20, started details about the going into every single sect, and he wants to know the essence, the secret, why people are the way they are. In fact, even the atheists that existed, the word Zindiq, Mu'attal, that could be the atheists of the time, but he refers to the idea of the fitra, and he knows very well at that moment that searching for that indubitable knowledge means that you would know something for what it is. And he says, هو الذي ينكشف فيه المعلوم كشافا لا يبقى معه ريب. There is no room for mistake, and the heart will never have any doubt. And he says that if I know that 10 is greater than 3, which is always true, we talk about math, we don't talk about, this is not the area of magic. In fact, he says that even if a magician turns a stick into a snake, he will not doubt that 10 is greater than 3. And this is very beautiful, because Imam Al-Ghazali is saying that math is reliable. It is so reliable that I would like my knowledge in the realm of metaphysics to be the same, like in math. He says that if someone does do this, then I will be only surprised. I will not basically change my idea about what's
holy grail of philosophy, isn't it? The sense of both mathematical truth or analytical truths are certain in logic, and so can we discover non-mathematical truths about the world around us with equal certainty? And this is a holy grail. We find this in Descartes, as you mentioned. We find it in Kant, Critique of Pure Reason, and in many other places. This search for absolutely certain foundational knowledge upon which to build all other knowledge. It's a branch of philosophy called epistemology, of course, the science of knowledge.
Yes, Imam Ghazali starts here from scratch. He wants to build his knowledge on solid foundations, and he began with the senses. Can I trust my own senses? Right. And he gave a couple of examples. We'll just mention one. He said, you look at the shade of a tree, that your immediate impression is that you see it fixed. Come an hour later, and you see that it has moved. It means that it was moving, but you could not detect the movement. It means that your eyesight deceived you. Yeah. Now here he uses an example from sight. He said this is the strongest. Like if he could doubt sight, then obviously everything else amongst the senses, all the senses, will fall into that the constructed state of not reliable. Of course, within that model. How did he reach the conclusion that the senses deceive? It's because what he described as the judge of reason. So the judge of the senses, sensibles, the judge of reason. The judge of reason now declared the judge of the sensible, the senses unreliable. Now Imam Ghazali assumes something, because Descartes has a different assumption. Okay, Imam Ghazali assumes something really peculiar. He said, assume that there is a judge above reason that once manifests itself, it will also render reason dubitable. Even the rational faculty cannot be relied upon anymore. And he was helped through the personification of the senses. The senses now are taking a stab back at reason. Here he could not solve the issue. So no senses. Of course, in practice, he would not doubt that he was going to drink or, okay. But at one point he will become almost like the sick person. Now, furthermore, Imam Ghazali mentions that in as much as when you awake from a dream, you will know that during the dream, the knowledge during the dream is very vivid, very real, but you awake into a reality that tells you it was a dream. The end of life is the same, that you will awake into a reality where you would reflect back. When the Quran speaks about that state in just immediately after death, فَبَصَرُكَ الْيَوْمَ حَدِيدٌ, that your sight becomes keen, your knowledge, there is no more dubitable knowledge. Once you pass that threshold, once you pass away, everything is accurate, everything that you doubted about or whatever you had, that's it. You would know the truth at that particular moment. From that moment on, there's nothing but the truth. Sometimes I say one's real CV is in the hereafter, because here we edit the CV, we manicure things, we just beautify things. I'm just,
Well, some people do, don't they? I've noticed this. I'm thinking, why have I never done that on my CV? But anyway, I'm not going to pick up bad habits.
So the real CV is on the day of judgment. There are no errors. Now, Imam Ghazali says that really, and I would like to highlight now, for 2 months, there are scholars who expanded the number of the months. For 2 months, Imam Ghazali was in a state of sophistry. In a state of sophistry. He could not solve it because you cannot solve it through the senses. You cannot solve it rationally because of that possibility of reason, because it became dubitable now. And the only solution, the physicians gave up on Imam al-Ghazali. He now would not really, he would not, drink, he would not eat, he would not. Physicians gave up on him. They knew that something that befell the heart, and ultimately the solution came through a light that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has cast into his breast. بِنُورٍ قَذْفَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى فِي الصَّدْرِ. That was the solution. And one might ask the question, all this fuss, and then you would say it's a light from God, not really a logical, argument, not really a mathematical proof, not really something in the DNA of people, that like today we are looking for. It's our age. That when some of us are already beyond the possibility even of knowing that you need something tangible. Imam al-Ghazali says no, and he was definitely, he is considered the renewer, the scholar of the 5th century. He was described as someone who no one ever saw a man like him. We talk about knowledge. We talk about nobody ever described his appearance, whether he was photogenic or no. Nobody ever mentioned anything about his. Very little is known about his life. And here we have someone who says it's your heart. It's not reason. Don't ignore reason, because once he had that light, he said that all the other issues came into place. Now the sensibles became okay, reason became okay. So it's not that we have now this light and now we turn our back to reason forever. No. And this is really very important to realize. Now we try to reach now the details about the philosophers, and I think this is extremely important. I'm not going to talk much more about the kalam. It's very, it's what I've said is enough to cover Imam Al-Ghazali's position about the Batinites. He systematically wrote against the esoterics, the Imamites, but the scandals of the Batinites, Fadaih al-Batiniyya. Al-Mustadhiri named it after the caliph the Abbasid caliph who existed at the time. But he wrote so many books about them. He never shied away, and I'm saying this because there are some Orientalists, who claim that Imam Al-Ghazali really ran away from Baghdad for fearing for his life. That's not the case. Had it been the case, why would he later on go back all the way to Tus Khurasan, which is really near Mashhad in Iran today, very close to the citadel of Alamut, the base, if you will, for their operation in the Muslim world at the time. And they systematically they did kill politicians, they did kill scholars, intimidation, but at the same time it seems that during that period they had also some what might be described as kind of hedonistic life. If you talk about those Batiniya, the Hashashin, in fact their name, they used hash, they used kind similar to marijuana, they used drugs and what have you. But I would like to highlight philosophy today much more than anything else, because Imam Ghazali was accused of many things that they have nothing to do with his writing, they have nothing to do with his position vis-a-vis philosophy. He was fair enough. Imam Ghazali divided the philosophy into different, and he had no problem with ethics. He had no problem with politics in essence. He had no problem with logic. In fact, Imam Ghazali was the first Muslim scholar to make logic part of his book Al-Mustasfa in Usul al-Fiqh, kind of an introductory remarks, like separated from the classical work, but within the same book, practically making it imperative for Muslim scholars to know logic. You will find that later on people subscribe to Ibn Taymiyyah's position that in essence says that the intelligent does not need logic and the ignorant does not benefit. So why teach it? That's the position. And there are many people who are in essence, people use logic every day. They might make mistakes, like subscribe to some fallacies without paying attention. But the masses, there's at least a large number of people who fall in between. They don't have naturally that capacity for 100% logical thinking, but they are not ignorant and they could benefit from learning logic. So math, even in the area of science, Imam Al-Ghazali had no problem at all. The only area where he had a problem is metaphysics. I think this is very important to realize. And in fact, this is exactly what people do in any faith. I mean, you are what you are. You are a Hindu because you are not a Muslim or a Jew or a Christian. You are a Buddhist because you are none of the other four. You are so in a sense, you are also defined by that which you are not. And it does make sense. Imam Ghazali, let's remember what I said earlier, that he wrote Maqasid al-Falasifa, kind of an introduction to philosophy. He was very objective, as we say today. But it's one thing to say the philosophers believe this. You would say, for example, how did existence come into being in Plato's philosophy? What's the prime mover or the four causes of Aristotle? That's their own thing. Even the Greeks today, they don't subscribe to this. So this is something that is part of the history of ideas. But at the time, and here I would now try to paint a picture, kind of a blueprint. So I'm going to use the what Imam Al-Ghazali used, the categories, the way he dealt with the different trends at the time, and just have some kind of an abstract blueprint. For example, Greek metaphysics today means any external school of thought that is not in line with Islam, coming from overseas, not in it doesn't have to be physically overseas. So should I subscribe to social Darwinism? Just to name one thing, Darwinism in itself. Should I subscribe something that is coming from outside?
Yeah.
Imam Ghazali responded to the Batinites, to the esoterics, to I'm going to throw a few names of the same sect. So they are the Sab'iyya, seventh Imamites. They are the Khurramiyya. So they come by. They have so many, offshoots of the same movement. And by the way, they are the closest to Christians, and that might be a surprise to some, maybe to many. The closest, offshoot from, that came from within Islam and just ended up wherever it is right now. The closest to Christian theology in being Neoplatonic and in ending up divinizing a human being are the Ismailis. I mean, an offshoot. So, for example, what we describe as Alawites in Turkey, because the Alawites in Yemen, they are from Ahlul Bayt, Sunnites. They have divinized Ali bin Abi Talib. This is in our books. This is what I taught. And when I had a chance once in Istanbul, I spoke with a well-educated Alawite. I asked him about whether they divinize Ali bin Abi Talib. He said this is widespread amongst the villagers, the farmers. It does. So he says that he does not subscribe to the idea, but it does exist, amongst the Alawites. So here we have something like this. So Imam Ghazali responded to that which came from outside. Imam Ghazali responded to that which came from inside, which is not compatible still. Then Imam Ghazali, the most important turf, if you will, the most important battleground, it's not the external in the sense of West today, for example. It's not the internal because of a sect that emerged historically. It's really the self. That's exactly the problem. And people could write many doctoral dissertations about Imam Al-Ghazali's penetration of the human psyche. It's that's exactly what he did. And Sufism is not it could be aesthetically beautiful, whirling dervishes, but so that's not real. The essence of Sufism is really seeing the world as it is. It's seeing that you are going to leave all this behind. So if you could distribute it before you leave, that's fine. It's not about your titles. Imam Ghazali says titles are of the devil. Al-alqab wa min ash-shaytan. He deconstructed every single thing that we celebrate today. I mean,
but you see, the very concept of Sufism is incredibly controversial in many circles, and one of the things that I found helpful to remember is that what goes under the term Sufism is quite a spectrum, a wide range of different practices and different views sometimes, and some of it is certainly within the law, the Sharia, and some practices arguably are not. And so the danger is that we, in a knee-jerk reaction, just dismiss Sufism as such, all of it, everything, without discriminating in a very careful way those practices, as I say, which are halal, and those and which everyone acknowledges, or virtually everyone. Some practices that go under the name of Sufism are unacceptable, and they're haram, without going into the details. So there is a tendency these days not to be discriminating and just to simply say all haram. Whereas in fact, Al-Ghazali, as you say, stressed the interior, they stressed the well, you gave some examples of those perspectives and principles that he thought were very valuable, which are very much Islamic, aren't they?
Oh, definitely. I think it's very important to realize that you might find people subscribing to any specific, school of thought today within the Sunnite worldview, who could err in the sense of their position and what they highlight and to what extreme that they could reach. Imam Ghazali was definitely critical of some Sufis. He was always critical of the scholars, without saying Hanafi scholars, Hanbali scholars, Maliki scholars, Shafs. He was always critical of scholars, as long as it's not the school of thought. It's basically what's going on in your heart. Did you study religion, or did you present yourself as a religious person so that you could attain a position from which you could benefit, personally? He mentions it is very clear in Ihya al-Ulumuddin. He said it could be money, it could be a woman, that you are presenting yourself as a pious, good person, because all this is because it's an appearance. Imam Ghazali is very critical of anyone, but he's also critical of, and always Sufis have been critical of Sufis who deviate really from the true path. It's about the cleansing the heart and seeing the world for what it is, and ultimately this is a passing. We are in transit, like people go from one country to another, and they might go direct and they might go through transit. Our existence really go through this transit stage, if you will. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would like us to have a U-turn, going back to paradise. And some of us will insist on going straight, though he or she would see so many signs saying danger, 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 cliff, danger, accident, danger. Sometimes they might have these, that you are making don't overspeed, don't do this, don't do that on that path, on that highway. So this is really the issue, and I would like to highlight in the area of because the philosophers were encyclopedic, if you will. They did not restrict themselves to metaphysics or to ethics. They dealt with everything. And Imam Ghazali was worried about two Muslims. The first Muslim, like as a position, the first Muslim would look at the good work of the philosophers in the area of science, and his problem would be overgeneralizing, saying that they are good in science, then they must be also good in metaphysics, agreeing to. So it's really generalizing their position. So that should not be the case. So some people could be excellent in science, but you don't accept their metaphysics, their story, if you will. And there's plenty of this today. Some luminary names, and probably we can mention some in relation to Imam Al-Ghazali. They know science, they know their stuff, as we say, but once it comes to metaphysics, they make a big mistake. In fact, on the argument. But let me just finish, with the second names.
I'm wondering if I should mention them, but I can think of a few. There's certain eminent scientists. One very famous one who's a zoologist, I think, from Oxford, who is doubtless brilliant on zoology and has written about this, but insists on making pronouncements on metaphysics, particularly atheism, which is a leading atheist advocate.
Yes.
where he has no training or knowledge whatsoever of theology or understanding the disciplines and the methodologies and the literature and the great tradition, but he insists on just making pronouncements from a position of great ignorance, and much to the embarrassment of other atheists. One hears them saying, "Oh dear, I wish you'd keep your mouth shut." But yeah, there are such people around, yes.
So the second Muslim that Imam Ghazali is worried about is the other way around. So the first one overgeneralized something good math, something good in science, and you extend this validity to metaphysics. The other one is the other way around. Someone who starts with metaphysics realizes that it should be rejected, then he will now overgeneralize the rejection, the negativity. Then, I reject metaphysics, then I will reject science because it comes from such and such person. This is a clear case of ad hominem, fallacy, where it becomes an attack on the person. This person is ignorant. This person is westernized. This person is that should not be the case. You don't generalize that which is positive. You don't generalize that which is negative, and you're simply being fair. Imam Al-Ghazali was fair. So I just put everything in perspective. So this is really the Imam Ghazali would continue really beyond, because he the second. This is all about knowledge, and Imam Ghazali would mention 3 cases where the metaphysically he does not agree with the philosophers. Namely, he's probably speaking now about Ibn Sina and Al-Farabi, but I would stick to the one issue really for the sake of brevity, but also so that we'll not really go into many issues. It is described as the eternity of the world, that the world would be co-eternal with God, which is really absolutely, how could God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how could God be the creator if the universe has been always there? What I'm saying might not reflect exactly, because for Ibn Rushd, he says it's really semantics. In tahafut, the destruction of destruction, the tahafut of tahafut, responding to Imam Ghazali, it's semantics.
The incoherence of the incoherence is another
translation. The incoherence, yes, it's semantics. Let me say this. If we look at the, astrophysicists today who are atheists, who say that the world is 13.7 billion years old, they are subscribing to Imam Al-Ghazali's worldview, not knowingly, okay? Because they pinpoint a moment where we go back to when time was, equals 0, and they admit that nothing preceded this. And I think it's very, very important to realize, by admitting that nothing, they talk about there could be no matter before matter, in a sense, because they say that the Big Bang theory, that particular point, is when matter came into existence, and they will say beautiful things that within a fraction of a second, the temperature was a quadrillion, degrees centigrade. It was material soup, no protons, no neutrons, no electrons, no quarks, nothing was formed yet. They still ponder, where did this come from if it did not exist? But they do say that that's the beginning, whether it's 13.7 billion, if they adjust it with a little bit here, or the idea is still there. And even some of them might escape to a different realm. They might introduce the idea that, there was like infinitesimal black holes. That cannot be the case. That there was a beginning. And Imam Al-Ghazali and the Ash'arites and the Sunnites, they will say there was a beginning. The universe is not co-eternal with God. Now, the fact that you don't understand, God, that's exactly perfect. It's okay, because only God understands God, except that which He wills us to understand and that which we are capable. And He endowed us with reason. So it's not serious. We don't shun our reason. Some Muslims, they might use certain area in jurisprudence which is really, they would say something like, had religion been through reason, then wiping on the bottom of the shoes would be, better than, or the right position, rather than wiping on the top of the shoes in ablution, what have you. You don't take that statement, and again, here we are overgeneralizing internally, dismissing science, dismissing reason, and maybe because of frustration with politics, frustration with colonialism, frustration with famine, frustration with you can see the Arab world is plagued by problems, and not only the Arab world, and today is even the West is plagued by many economic disasters, the mass shootings in the United States, name it. Every country has its own moral problem, but that does not mean withdrawing from the realm of of science, and the realm, the society at large, from being a civilizational force, a positive force, the way the Andalusian paradigm was, the way Baghdad was. And this is really a response. I know that you have answered this with your guest in a previous program about Neil deGrasse, but the blaming Imam Al-Ghazali for the downfall of Islamic civilization is a great, really, injustice, and really people don't realize what happened historically. I think one way of putting it is look at what happened historically. Imam Al-Ghazali, in fact, at the beginning of Ihya Ulumuddin, the revival of Islamic sciences, Imam Al-Ghazali makes agriculture and the engineering, in the sense of really building shelters and clothing and all the industries related to them, they are a must. They are obligatory. They are religiously. It is a religious obligation upon every community to produce what it needs, whether it's a physician or a scientist or somebody who makes tools for spinning wool, or for agriculture, or what have you. So the idea is, look at the map of the Muslim world, and just try to remember that in 1258, the Mughals destroyed Baghdad. Literally, it was simply the Vikings of the East destroying everything. Then in 1492, and we have mentioned this in the previous program, but I'm trying to highlight this issue. 1492, the destruction of the Islamic presence, let's say, the ethnic cleansing, I would say. They did not tolerate any Muslim in Andalusia after 1492, and in the center, in the heart between both the Crusades in around 1099, when Imam Ghazali was already on his way back. So from this journey that he began in Baghdad, and we'll complete it in a minute, inshallah. So the two wings have been destroyed, the heart has been occupied, and how could an Islamic civilization continue as usual? Now we go back to Imam Ghazali. After he left Baghdad, he went to Damascus. For the whole journey from Baghdad to Baghdad was about 11 years. And I think very important to remember, 11 years, Baghdad to Baghdad. Baghdad, Damascus, where he would lock himself up in the minaret of the Umayyad mosque. Then from Damascus to Jerusalem, where he stayed in the two rooms on top of the Gate of Mercy, the Golden Gate as it is described in English. And from Jerusalem, he went to Hebron, Al-Khalil, and there he pledged three things. One of them is never to debate anyone. Again, it's about if you debate, it's very bad for one's heart. You might win an argument, but that's bad.
There's so many people, including myself, perhaps most of all, who need to learn that lesson today.
Inshallah, we will all learn this. And then he went to Hajj and He visited the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Medina and back to Baghdad. He did not visit the Nizamiya college where he used to teach. It's just like keeping a distance. And some of his students compared Imam Al-Ghazali before and after his journey. Before giving up his position, distributing his wealth, like at the peak of his material achievement, if you will, his entourage would compete with that of the emirs, the princes, the sultans, and so he had a Rolls Royce like them, I would say, just simply as an example. But on the way back from his journey, they saw nothing on him. One of his students said nothing on him except a container for water and staff, nothing else. That was everything. That was his property.
Well, yeah, have you concluded there? Well, that's an amazing. I mean, there's more to say, of course, on this.
Well, of course. Yeah, I mean, it's very important to realize that right at the very beginning, we realized that he wrote this book when he was just reaching 50 years of age. Imam Ghazali died at, he was 55. Let's remember, we talk about lunar years. 50 means just 1.5 years less than the solar years. And so he was really providing a blueprint, really an epistemological treatise. It's not to entertain at all. In fact, one is not entertained at all when we talk about indubitable knowledge, when we talk about doubt, when we talk about sincerity, because it requires you to give up something. It requires you to change your way of life. It challenges you to follow his path. And when he says it is spirituality, it is spirituality. Yes, we need to do all the things that we need to do, our religious obligations, our prayers, our fasting, but ultimately it's spirituality. And this is why we will find details in the revival of Islamic sciences, Ihya Ulumuddin. So fasting, yes, how to fast. What are the other things what's the package? Pilgrimage, what's the package? Charity, zakah, what's the package? Prayer, what's the package? Which he calls he says the secret of, meaning that one needs to reach a certain level of understanding that down the road it is spirituality. It's this spiritual realm. It's not ignoring what you need. People can take the argument in two directions. You reject and you are entrenched in the material realm, and people who are going to abandon everything. But he himself was not the first one to shun position, public office, to distribute wealth. So this is really, and ultimately after teaching for a short while in Nishapur at the encouragement of Fakhr al-Mulk, son of Nizam al-Mulk, and his answer was not an immediate yes. He said that he consulted with Arbab al-Qulub, the lords of the hearts, meaning the Sufis. So he was not making a decision on his own. He taught there until Fakhr al-Mulk himself was assassinated, as I said earlier. From there back to Tus Khurasan, where he split his time between the novices on this spiritual path and the students of learning, until basically many stories about how he ended his life, or the way his life unfolded right at the very end. And let's basically mention another book that he wrote. It could be the very last, Minhaj al-Abidin, the path of the worshippers. So that's really another, maybe one day inshallah we'll have a chance to go over that.
Indeed, inshallah, you will come on again as a welcome guest to talk about the other aspects of Al-Ghazali's life. And one of the things I find very attractive about him, well, there are many things, but it is his total dedication, his sincerity to pursue the truth, both intellectually and spiritually, to this logical conclusion. He wasn't satisfied with an ivory tower life, like as a Cambridge Don, if I can pick on that university. No, for him, it was a holistic, existential, spiritual, as well as an academic and intellectual journey, which literally took him away from Baghdad. It took him to many other places. But it's his indomitable sincerity, relentless sincerity, niyat, to find the truth and to find that certainty that he craved so much, which is quite extraordinary, that he gave up so much to to find that. And he came home in the end, both geographically and spiritually. He found that place that he wanted to be at. So Deliverance from Error, it has several different titles. I mean, it's translated differently, confusingly in English, but the one I prefer is Deliverance from Error, and one can certainly buy copies of it very easily on the usual platforms like Amazon and so on. I've got my copy from Amazon. It's part autobiographical, as you say. It's part intellectual journey, exploration of theology and philosophy. A very interesting text, which I do recommend.
Thank you.
Right. Well, thank you very much, sir, for your time, Professor Dr. Mustafa Abu Sway. Absolutely fascinating. Inshallah, as I say, you've been on a guest again, because there's so much more that can be said about this extraordinary human being, Al-Ghazali. So until next time, inshallah.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.